Hello, I'm Dr. Erin. Welcome to my channel about emergency medicine and wilderness medicine moulage. Today we'll be talking about bruising, and specifically how to do it cheaply, though we will go through the range of materials up to the more expensive ones.
Quick disclaimer, I have no financial disclaimers, no one is paying me for anything, nothing I say reflects the views of my employer, etc, etc.
Now let's have some fun. The basis of all of our effects is color, which we usually achieve with paint. The two commonly used paints are water-based and alcohol-based. Water-based is cheaper, easier to remove, and like classic everyday makeup, sits as a layer on top of your skin. Alcohol-based colors act more like a stain, which gives a more realistic and under-the-skin look. It's more durable, but also more expensive and can dry out the skin more. There are several different applicators we can use depending on what you have on hand. My personal favorite is a paintbrush. In this case, a wide, fluffy brush. We'll start with water-based paints, which I love for being fast, cheap, and still looking quite good. There are a lot of different brands for these bruise wheels. Cheapest is $7 for a 6-color bruise wheel and some sponges. Mehron is more of a brand name, $15 for a 5-color bruise wheel. I do tend to like Mehron better because I think the colors, especially the yellow, are closer to physiologic, but both are quite reasonable and I'll demonstrate both throughout these tutorials. The fastest bruise is just your brush and some paint. Works well for fresh bruises, which are just red, as you can see here. The brush provides good texture variation and a little bit of color variation. But I find the color builds up too quickly when trying to use multiple colors for an older bruise. So I like to use isopropyl alcohol to thin the paint and get more color variation, or erase anything I'm not fond of, any mistakes, because if no one else sees them, they don't count, right? And of course, isopropyl alcohol will dry a lot faster than water. Here again, a fresh bruise will be predominantly red. Start by applying the color lightly, then go back with a bit more on the brush to add a focus on one side of the bruise and make it more asymmetric. You can use just a touch of the alcohol to add more variation to the color, or if you apply too much paint, you can take some of it away with the alcohol. You can apply heavier alcohol to create an area of central clearing, as bruises often heal that way. To use it, I add some alcohol to my applicator and keep another paper towel on hand to pat it dry. Otherwise, the colors will run. Most bruises are multicolor, especially the older ones, so different shades of the same color and different color paints will both add depth and realism to the bruise. Fresh bruises are red, maybe with hints of blue. A day or two old and you should add more blue. A few days more, closer to a week, and the hemoglobin is converting to bilirubin, bringing yellows and browns and greens into the bruise. For these really older bruises, I like to start with a yellow base, add some green, and then hints of blue and red. Be aware that the blue overwhelms easily, so in any of these cases, I recommend applying it minimally and then dabbing the excess away with a paper towel or some alcohol. And here are the results. Lacking a paintbrush, the next method I demonstrate is with a scrunched up paper towel. This is mainly to reiterate that you don't need much in the way of fancy tools to create moulage. The same color schemes apply, so red and a little blue for fresh bruises, add more blue and yellow for something a few days old, and predominantly yellow and green, minimal blue and red for something over a week old. As you can see, I'm still also making good use of my isopropyl alcohol for covering up my mistakes, erasing my mistakes, or getting a little more color variation. Lastly, I demonstrate sponges. There are 3 densities as seen here. The pattern they make when larger and less dense is rather capillary-like, while the denser sponge is very grainy, more peticule, which is to say lots of tiny dots of color. The best method, in my opinion, is a combination of all of the above materials and applicators, of course. But we don't always have the time or the space for it, so play around with what you have and what works for you. Alcohol-based paints are significantly more expensive at around $50 for the set, and you need at least 90% isopropyl, ideally 99% isopropyl alcohol to activate them. No alcohol and those colors aren't going anywhere. Works to your advantage later, of course. Another advantage of alcohol-based paints is that it's easier to control the colors, in that more alcohol means less pigment and lighter color, and you can even mix different colors in the lids of your paints. careful of getting too much alcohol in the brush though, as then your paint may run or pool. I do find that it's actually a good bruise look. See the closest bruise to my wrist, but it's not always what you're going for. Again, you can use any of the applicators I mentioned, but a paintbrush is the most popular. The color builds up slower with these, requiring more layers, so it can take longer for that reason. Here at the end, we have a side-by-side comparison of alcohol-based and water-based paints. After it dries, you'll find that alcohol-based bruises will look more real because they look more ingrained to the skin and they stay on very well. You can't wipe them off casually or with water, only alcohol. Very useful if your simulation will involve a lot of rolling around, like search and rescue, or getting wet, like being next to a lake or on a rainy day, something like that. That said, you can see that the water-based paints also look very good and far much cheaper, and also tend to be a lot faster. You will require alcohol to remove the alcohol-based paints, but I find it works very well to remove the water-based ones as well. That wraps up the basics of bruising, including how to do it for under $20. All of the supplies are available online, mostly on Amazon, so acquiring them is cheap, convenient, and fast. The links are in the description below, and be sure to check out my other videos for information on lacerations, burns, and prosthetics.